most people are waking up to the fact that we've been lied to about so many things. And this is why there's so many different entrances into this rabbit hole, like the big umbrella of all the rabbit holes that pretty much starts with the government has lied to us about everything. Now you need to self-experiment, take things back to first principles, test on yourself, see what actually works, and then share that from a grassroots level to the people you care about and on social media.
Ben, how did you find Carnivore?
Mr. Dave Mack, it is an absolute pleasure to be here, my friends. You are doing such awesome work in the space, so I need to give you a big shout out. Just the work ethic you show and convincing, well, not convincing, but just encouraging everyone subtly to get out there and talk about their story. Share your story with the world and just get the word out. Super important that we do that. And I really appreciate you for always doing that. Um, my story, I'm actually very excited to share because I believe I have a different answer than anyone who's ever come on your show. And as I told you before we recorded, I have actually listened to every single episode of Dave's show while building my website, which we'll talk about soon. But in a single word, it's Bitcoin, or more specifically, Bitcoiners. And we'll dive more into that once we get into my story. But these two communities, the Bitcoiners and the carnivores, have a lot of overlap. And that's one of my biggest goals is to bring those more together. So I'll be sure to share more on that soon. But to get into my story, to quickly skim through my very early life, I had a pretty standard growing up childhood in a middle class family who loved me very much. They always wanted me to be as healthy as possible. So we had lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and limited the processed food pretty well. We weren't perfect, but it was a treat. And of course, we thought meat is bad, so we have a little bit of chicken breast here and there, pork here and there, almost no red meat. I probably like once a month we'd have a little bit of that. Um, so that was pretty much my whole life, and I was one of the lucky few who didn't get any really bad sicknesses from the standard American diet. I would consider that standard American diet, mixed balanced diet, whatever. Um, I had a little bit of asthma that would bug me every once in a while. I had acne when I was younger. I never really had like great body shape. I always had a little bit of skinny fat with a soft belly. Unless I hit the gym and then I could get in better shape. But I was always just kind of average. And since I had so many really sick, mentally and physically sick friends around me growing up, I felt quite thankful because I knew people who were really struggling. And especially when I was in college, I went to the University of Washington here in Seattle. And if you don't know about Seattle, Dave, the whole Northwest is very, very much like the mecca of plant-based everything. Everyone's vegan. Everyone thinks meat's bad. It's Starbucks coffee for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's just not. It's pretty much the opposite of what we now know is a healthy diet. So I was surrounded by people who weren't very healthy. So, anyways, I felt pretty thankful. Didn't have any huge issues, but I've always wanted to be healthy. I just didn't figure it out until around 20 to 2022. And that 2020 range is when I fell into the Bitcoin world. And the Bitcoin world has a lot of similarities with carnivores. These are people who really want to optimize themselves in every way they can. And I think that just as we thought the carnivores were crazy before we joined that world, a lot of people think the Bitcoiners are crazy and they have the wrong idea. They think these people are, super obsessed with technology and all about like finance and nerdiness, but these people are really, really awesome. They are looking toward the future. They're trying to end the Federal Reserve and fix the money and get rid of the fiat system. The fiat is a word for by decree. It's basically the money that we use these days is printed by the government, which if you've read, I'm sure you've read Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise. All of these regulatory bodies in the government are the true root of the problem here because the government passes down all this money, they get bought out, they get all these lobbyist ties, and it just turns into this big machine until we come to where we are today, where all of the places that are the most critical to have healthy people are under government rule, the hospitals, the schools, and the like old folks' homes, like the retirement homes, they're fed total garbage, and that's all because the government, which is funded by the money printer. I'm getting a little off the rails here, but anyway, I love Bitcoiners. They're an awesome group of people, just like the carnivores. And because of that, there are a lot of people in that world who are big carnivore advocates. So I spent a lot of time around these people from 2020 to 2022, going to all these meetups. And at the meetups, they would have just piles and piles of meat everywhere. And of course, at that point, I thought that's weird. That can't be healthy. But I just trusted these people because they kept being right about so many things. And I eventually decided I'd look further into it. So around 2022, started experimenting with my diet for the first time. I followed a bunch of people on Instagram who were talking about seed oils and how bad they were. So I was like, okay, that's a good place to start. I lived in Texas at the time, and my apartment complex had this pool with sun chairs outside, so I could just test this theory everyone talks about, how you can take sunlight better. And this was great for me because my whole life growing up, 20-30 minutes in the mild Pacific Northwest sun and I would burn. I would easily burn all the time. And so I thought, this is interesting. I can just cut the seed oils out and actually start tracking the progress. And lo and behold, a few months after I eliminated the seed oils, I can just lay out in the sun chair in the hot Texas heat and I got no burn. I would just get a little bit tan. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I also feel better. I feel more energetic. I'm sleeping better. There's something to this. So just kept taking more and more steps down that health hole until I just realized that meat really is super good for you, all this red meat. So I started really increasing that in my diet, having more and more. And so for all of 2022 until 2023, I was changing my diet. I was adding more and more meat, having less and less processed foods, less fruits and vegetables. But I kind of settled it the animal based that we hear now. This is this new thing that we've got the Paul Saladinos and the Carnivore Aurelia saying that, oh, you need to have a little bit of fruit in there. And so I was on that. I was on the meat, fruit, and honey for about 6 months, the first half of 2023 roughly, and I felt very good. I felt good. It was definitely a good spot, but I just wanted to keep learning. I'm always trying to optimize. I'm just an optimizer, and I found Anthony Chaffee's podcast. And anyone who's ever come across his podcast called the Plant Free MD will understand that there's just no going back from that point. So I knew two things very quickly. The first one was I had to try this. I had to try this all meat crazy diet that I've heard about. And the second thing I knew was I needed to make a, a website about this, a compilation of resources to help people through this rabbit hole and get them through to this point, because I felt like I really struck something big. And just as a little bit of context, this is something I've done for a while. I really enjoy making websites about topics that I'm passionate about to help other people go through the rabbit hole faster. The very first one I made is called whybitcoinonly.com. I made that because a lot of people were confused about like this cryptocurrency word that we hear thrown around, and like, what is money? How do we, optimize the money? What is Bitcoin actually doing? So I made that website, and Why Bitcoin Only is out there for people to check out. And once I started going down a carnivore rabbit hole, I started building whycarnivore.com. So I got that domain settled, and I just started going through Anthony Chaffee's podcast, just categorizing in my phone all these different episodes I was listening to. Like, oh, this answers this question. A lot of people wonder, oh, like, do I need vegetables? No, I put that here. And there's so many different points that people get stuck on in this world. Like, there's just a whole list of fear, uncertainty, and doubt thrown around it. And I thought it would just be really useful to have a resource where these are all laid out one at a time with a handful of good videos that totally debunk it. And so I just started building away, and that was last August, like exactly 1 year ago, actually. And since then, I've been traveling around. I went to Colombia that around September last year, so September 2023, just like a month after I started really diving in here. And here's a fun point to mention. I had a friend traveling with me to Colombia who's just like me. He's very interested in optimizing. He wants to be the healthiest he can be. He's very open to experimentation and questioning everything. he had horrible insomnia his whole life, and he was always looking for a solution to that. And I talked him into trying carnivore with me. I heard a couple of stories of people really helping their brain and helping their sleep. So he decided, like, let's do it together. So him and I both, we flew over to Medellin, Colombia, and we just started right away. Just first shopping run, we just got a huge pile of steak, pile of ground beef. We were just living in hostels the whole time. We were backpacking in a few different places through hostels. So that was full of fun conversations, because usually hostels are very much a plant-based world. There's a lot, like, travelers in general are kind of that kind of vibe of, the lost spiritual soul who is trying to do their best, but they haven't figured it out yet, which is kind of plant-based people when you think about it. And so lots of very interesting conversations had as we cooked in these kitchens together, just like these massive piles of steak when all these people around us are, making salad. And surprisingly, Dave, I found that compared to what I believe it would have been a few years ago, there are more people that were open-minded to it. I think there's really a trend of more people being open to it, because more and more people are just getting sick and having all these problems come up. And one of the benefits I had from going through this rabbit hole so deeply, listening to your YouTube channel, Chafee's channel, Dr. Barry, Dr. Sean Baker, all of which I listened to during my time there in Colombia, they have testimonials built up for every single one of these things that are very common. So what I've really found out you just have to do is you have to figure out what their issue is. You have to become their friend. Be not don't just like go attacking their way of life, their way of eating, but anyone that's been on a highly plant-based diet for long enough, they're going to have some issues. That's pretty much always guaranteed. And if you figure that out, you say, "Oh, I heard this episode of this podcast once. It might be interesting for you. You don't want to check it out?" And just send it to them, and at that point, it's in their hands. Or as I do now, I send them a link, like a hyperlink from my website. You can copy paste any of the sections in there of any of these illnesses that, like, there's over 300, I think, that I compiled in there with just a batch of different episodes of people who have healed that with a carnivore diet. So I just send people that link and say, here's some things that might be interesting. And at that point, it really takes the burden off of yourself and puts it in their hands. Like, if they really want to explore this and heal themselves and look outside of what they once believed, then they'll figure it out. And sometimes you just gotta let people figure it out on themselves, and you can't fix everybody. I'm definitely that type of person. I really want to just beat it into everyone's heads and just fix them. But you and I both know that just doesn't work. The best thing we can do is exactly what you're doing, just spreading the word, sharing stories, and especially sharing testimonials and real life stories, because there's never been a lower point in trust for authority ever, because everyone is waking up to this fact that, at least most people are waking up to the fact that we've been lied to about so many things. And this is why there's so many different entrances into this rabbit hole, like the big umbrella of all the rabbit holes that pretty much starts with the government has lied to us about everything. Now you need to self-experiment, take things back to first principles, test on yourself, see what actually works, and then share that from a grassroots level to the people you care about and on social media, and try to grow that. And that's how we're really going to fix this thing. It's never going to be a top-down fix. It's too deep. It's too deeply intertwined at this point. We have to make it a bottom-up effort. And since we have social media, that's a very powerful tool to do that. So anyway, yeah, I just to kind of speed through the last bit there. I mean, I traveled a couple more places. I came back home for the holidays. I did that thing where I just dump all this on my poor parents and trying to, tell them about it, and they're just not interested. And just trying to spread the gospel and realizing, you know what, I think that the best use of my time and energy is just building this website right now. And this was like my project that I was just obsessed with for a whole year. So last winter, I live in an absolutely beautiful place. You can probably see my background. This is just my backyard full of trees. I'm in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. I actually live pretty close to Sean Baker. We're not too far off. But I can walk all over the place. I can walk to the beach. I can walk to the mountains. I can walk through trails. So I would just plop my headphones on, just queue up a podcast, and just grind my way through those. And I was just building this site out every single day, pretty much all day, 16 plus hour days, and it was beautiful because the the longer I was on a carnivore diet, the better my brain was working, the more just superhuman my focus was, and motivation to get this thing done, and just my energy levels in general. And I guess I should probably talk about the actual changes I experienced. Like I said, I didn't have any massive health issues that really pushed me into this out of a state of desperation, like so many people do. I'd say the majority do. I just did it off of curiosity. And so my asthma totally went away. I used to have like mild asthma that would pop up when I would, work out really hard or be around cats. That was like an allergy trigger. That's totally mild out. Let me see. I actually put up a little list here. My skin got better. I used to have, like when I was younger, I had horrible acne. Now I'm 29 years old. I had only a little bit of acne. It was like on my arms, and it would like pop up around my face every once in a while. I don't have a single zit now unless I cheat and eat carbs. And then when I eat carbs, a little zit pops up. I've noticed that. Shed off a few pounds of weight that I didn't need. Just within a couple of weeks, I just completely shredded out. I always had just a little bit of a belly there. I wasn't obese, but I was a little soft. 2, 3 weeks in, it just melted right off because that's just what happens when you go carnivore. It's like impossible to be fat. So that was just super cool and easy. But the biggest one by far was the mental side for me, and I never felt like my mental acuity was bad. Like I said, compared to the other people around me, it was pretty good. But I just hit a whole new gear on this. My energy went up, my motivation went up to really. I really wanted to build things that helped people find this healing. As I'm sure you understand, you're doing the exact same thing. This is really motivating when we see all of these people that are healing and we feel better ourselves. We just want to share that. That's a natural human thing. And so when you're healing your hormones and your whole body from a biological system from the ground up, these natural instincts of wanting to help your fellow people start to increase as well. And that's so universal. And so I felt that like rising up in me, like I need to make this thing. I need to spread the word and just help more people figure this thing out. So yeah, the whole year I would just pretty much getting up at 8 a.m., open the laptop, pull up like 5 or 6 YouTube channels full of carnivore content, and just grind until 1 a.m. that day. Just I got a plug-in on my laptop that lets you increase the speed even faster than 2x. So I was like flying through these at 3, 4x speed, just going through tons and tons of videos, reading all of them, doing like 100-hour weeks, just grinding on getting this website finished because I knew the world needed it. And I didn't have a job either. I had no income. I just like, well, I'm going to go totally broke from this, but the world needs this. We got to do this. Like this is necessary. This is something that people need. We need more resources out there to get people on track to being healthy. So grinded, and up till about 3 weeks ago, I finally launched a sucker. Whycarnivore.com website done. It's out there. It's full of resources. Dr. Chafee found it and gave it a big shout out. You gave it a big shout out and gave it a nice boost, and more people are finding it. I'm super thankful, and it's been nothing but good feedback so far. So I'm looking forward to just continue spreading the word on that and on a carnivore diet. And life is fantastic. I'm loving it, every bit of it, and excited to be here.
So, the site is massive. I mean, I can imagine how much time that must have taken because it's huge, right?
Yeah, it's like I think 320 pages when I put it out in Google Docs. It was just crashing Google Docs to even try to copy and paste into WordPress. So it's too big. So like I literally it takes several minutes to even make edits now because it's so big it crashes the site. But yeah, I mean that is I think everyone out there needs to find their niche where they're able to help and provide value to a community like this. And there's people like Dr. Chafee who have a really good memory for detail. He knows how the human body works so well. He remembers history and the biological evolution we've been through in terms of diet so well. I have a terrible detail retention. I can't remember dates or body parts or any of those things. That just slides off my brain. But what I can do is I can just consume a disgusting amount of content and just like one way, just gobble it up all day, every day. And I just never get tired. I just have such an obsession with learning that I can do that as long as I need to. And so I figured out that was my niche. This is where I can help. This is where I can do something. I'm not going to go on and, talk about how a human body works, but I am going to, build some. I'm like the librarian. I can sort the things. I understand what people's pain points are pretty well. So I know how to collect resources in a way that I know they will help people really well and answer the questions that need to be answered. So that's what I did.
Yeah, nice. So just on your journey, when you had that period where you were kind of, if I could say, Saladino-ivore, and then you switched to the meat only. At what point after that switch did you realize, oh, hang on, there's something to this?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was feeling pretty good when I was doing that, and I was following the meat, fruit, and honey, but I just kept learning, and when I heard Chafee's podcast, that's what got me to try it, and it wasn't an enormous difference physically, but mentally, I saw a big difference between the two. And I can feel it now. Like I'm not 100% strict. I occasionally throw, a carb in there just kind of as an experiment to see what happens. Especially when I was in Mexico, they have some freaking. My buddy had coconut tree in his front yard and like mangoes around, so I'd occasionally drop one in just to see what happened, just as an experiment. I'd journal about it, and I very consistently found that at the very least, including fruit in would just kind of throw the rhythm off, and just the satiety signals would get thrown off a little bit. And I'm not going to say that like eating a mango is going to kill you, but if you're looking for optimal, which I could definitely tell that my satiety signals were off a little bit. It tastes just like so sweet. After you don't eat it for a while and you eat it, it's just like, wow, this is actually like pure sugar. I never really realized it before because I was eating it every day, but it really is pure sugar. And then as I learn more and more and just dive down a rabbit hole, you learn more about how, you know, modern fruit that you see, which these influencers are talking about and saying they're super good for you, the pineapple and the coconut and, the berries and all these things, these are nothing like the way nature actually made them. These are completely human manipulated since the agricultural revolution began to be full of sugar and juiciness and be as tasty as possible so they can sell more. So I would say that like there wasn't a massive difference in feeling, but when I actually did the research and seeking for what the optimal is, that's what I found. And I'm sticking with that. And just in terms of the message people are spreading online, I have no problem at all. People can eat whatever they want. It's totally cool if people want to have some fruit, that's fine. And I cheat every once in a while too on like certain occasions. Like when I was in Mexico, my buddy had a birthday party in his rich parents' penthouse suite, and there's champagne around. I'm gonna have some champagne. Come on, I'm not 100% perfect, but I'm never gonna go online and say that these things are good for you. Which some of these people, I feel like they really just are addicted to sugar and they want that sugar, and so they do the mental gymnastics in a way to say that is good for you to make themselves feel better. You know what I mean? Uh, and this is an interesting psychological phenomenon that I see happen in pretty much all the rabbit holes I've jumped into. A perfect other example is Bitcoin, where in the Bitcoin world, like I mentioned, Bitcoin is the ultimate hard money. This is like the money that is the digital gold. And we can actually dive into this a little deeper later, why carnivores should care about Bitcoin if you want. But the gist of this point is there's a bunch of people that can't quite get there. They get into this crypto world, they buy all these crypto tokens, and they just lose all their money gambling basically. And it's like they're so close to figuring it out, but they just get stuck in this second place land. And I'm seeing the same exact thing in the carnivore world where you've got carnivore is the peak, in my opinion. I think the lion diet is the peak of health. If you're trying to be the healthiest you can be, just meat, salt, and water, like Chafee preaches. But there's so many people that just get stuck on that animal based level, and they just have just a little bit of poison and they think that it's amazing. Like this a fantastic epiphany they've all had. Like, oh, if I just don't eat the complete garbage and only have some of this, that must be the best. But it really isn't, because there's another level to the game, and it's a lot of people settle there and really get comfortable there because they love listening to these influencers say sugar is good for you and honey is good for you because it tastes good. Like they and this is why they get so many followers, because they're telling people what they want to hear most of the time, and people will just gravitate toward that. They don't want to go listen to Dr. Chafee who says, no, none of that is good for you. Like I know it's like whatever you want to call it, strict or boring, but meat, salt, and water is the healthiest human diet. It's what we've been doing for our entire existence, and that is the peak. If you want to explore in the other areas, and it, just know that you're trading health for mouth pleasure. And that's sort of my mindset now. Is I just think about that. If I ever do cheat, I know wholeheartedly I am trading health for momentary mouth pleasure. Is it really worth it? That's up to you. That's up to everyone. But just when you're be careful about the message you spread online, because there are people out there who want to become the healthiest they can be. And I think it's important to have a true solid truth that people know what optimal is, and then it's completely up to them if they want to go lower than that. Totally fine.
I think you make a good point about the sugar, and um, if you kind of take a step, a more abstract step from that, is you get a lot of people who might be more plant-based who accuse carnivores of, oh, you're just scamming people, or you're just trying to sell something online, or whatever it happens to be. And it's like, that makes no sense, because what carnivores are saying is, it's not a marketing message. Like, we're saying to people, you have to work. This is difficult for you to transition into. You're going to have to never eat sugar again. That, like, give up the thing that you are addicted to, that's more addictive than any other substance you've ever put in your body. And, like, so that accusation never rings true to me, like, for anybody, because it's too difficult to sell.
Absolutely. And you listen to people like Dr. Chafee or Dr. Berry, their entire message is like, we're trying to free you from these needing these supplements, or having these issues. And funny enough, a lot of the people in that animal based zone, they're selling supplements. That's interesting. Why, I wonder, like, why they would get into that. Like, where is their financial incentive really? And this idea of organs too. Organs are interesting because most of the time, from the listening that I've done, the stories I've heard, the general consensus I've come to about organs is that they typically cause more problems than they fix in most cases. There are niche cases where people with certain issues might benefit from a lot of vitamin A, and like liver is the main one. And people with thyroid issues, they just having a really big boost in vitamin A might be useful, but most of the time it screws up their body's rhythm, and you end up like Saladino, where he has a bunch of health problems because he's just pounding liver every single day, which is not good for you. That's not natural. And so I personally am not even really that interested in eating organs. They don't really look that appetizing to me, and I'm just good with fatty red meat. I think that has everything you need. I'm with, in the Chafee camp there as well. Like, that's all you really need. I might experiment with some organs here, see how I feel. Maybe it'll be an interesting thing to add in, but I think that be cautious with those, because they can throw off your systems if you have too much of it, because they're not meant to be consumed in large quantities. Like, if you're taking the nature ancestral look at it, we weren't eating plates full of liver. Those were going usually to the dogs, and you'd have a little bit of it, if any.
I think a good advertisement for meat just works. Meat on its own, meat, salt, water works is, well, of course, Chafee, because I mean, look at him. And and also Michaela Peterson. I mean, as far as I'm aware, she's not eating organs and stuff like that. It's just meat. I mean, she's just had a healthy baby. She looks great. They're good advertisements for it, right?
It's good to have good spokespeople out there for sure. Just, I mean, yeah, Dr. Chafee, if you look at him, he's just a beefy stud. You know, I got to meet Ken Berry and Sean Baker in person a couple weeks ago at the Cattleman's Feast in Nashville, that part of the Bitcoin conference. They made an appearance, and these are both just like big studly dudes. Like, it's great to have them on our side, and they look good. Um, Sean Baker, of course, has a little bit of a genetic boost. Not everyone is going to be 6'5" and jack just from eating meat, but definitely good to have those guys out there, and that's totally attainable for a lot of people. And at the very least, you're going to get much better and look better and feel better, like they all do. Like, you look at Ken Berry's old videos. I went through his channel from the beginning, and you could tell his health has changed so much. He went through a huge transformation from the I can't remember actually if he started when he was like on a sad diet, but at least he had a lot of videos when he was on keto, and then after he went carnivore, he looks better. You can tell that he looks better. He has just more pep in his voice. Just better skin, just more color to his face, and it's cool to watch people going through these changes in real time as they take videos. And this is another reason for people who are out there who maybe even haven't started yet, or you want to do this, to just start a YouTube channel, start recording yourself, and take pictures of yourself, but at your absolute worst, because you'll be happy you did later. You'll be able to look at how much you've changed, and it's a huge motivator to continue improving.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people, and it happened with myself as well, because you try so many diets throughout your life, you just give up with taking the before pictures and all that kind of thing, 'cause you think it's not going to work anyway.
Or you're
And
just
this
embarrassed,
one,
like you feel bad about yourself.
right?
Like, I don't want to I'm scared of the camera. A lot of people do that.
Yeah, and so it is important because this one does work, and you will want to look back.
Exactly. Exactly. I would love to just talk to people about some other rabbit holes that I think are super relevant to carnivores. And this is sort of my focus now. Is now that I've figured this rabbit hole out, I figured out the carnivore is the way, and I've really gotten to know these people. I've had them on my own podcast, and I know that Dave, you so graciously include everyone's links in the show notes, so you've got my YouTube channel in there that people can check out. I've interviewed all these carnivores, really got to know them, and found out that there are some extremely relevant new rabbit holes that I want people to look into that are great next places to go if once they finish your channel, which good luck, you're never going to finish all Dave's videos. But if you ever need a break from the carnivore videos, the first one I mentioned earlier is Bitcoin. And I'd love to just give people an overview on exactly why that's so relevant. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but the main book that people need to read, which is like the big fat surprise of the Bitcoin world, is called The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And this is an incredible book because it walks through the history of money itself. How we used to use seashells for money, and then we used funny rocks, and then we found gold. And then humans used gold for 5,000 years as our form of money. And when you look at how society worked during that time of being on a gold standard, people were happier, healthier, they had more artistic nature. People just worked better compared to today. When you look at people today, people are really stressed out, they're sick, they're not healthy, they're not very motivated to improve themselves, and they've got all these issues. And a lot of that comes down to inflation. And us carnivores understand inflation at least decently because we buy meat and we see how freaking expensive it is. It's really hard to get a ribeye these days. It's ridiculous. And the reason why that is because inflation is so bad. The government is now able to print all the money that it wants. And when the government prints money, everyone else's money gets diluted. And so when you see the price of a steak going up, it's not that the steak is getting more valuable, it's that our money itself is losing value. It's being debased by money printing. And when you contrast that with gold, back in the early days, 5,000 years we were on a gold standard, you can't print gold. So there was no inflation. When you got a bar of gold as a child and you saved it in your room, at the end of your life, that gold is worth more. So you're incentivized to save. Your money actually bought more over time. And this is why it's so important for everyone on earth to understand this, especially carnivores too, because we're thinking about, building a better future. creating healthier humans in the future that have better mental states. By fixing this money problem of the government being able to print money, it's a huge like cascading effect of positivity. And where does Bitcoin come into this? Bitcoin is the digital version of gold. It does the same thing as gold in the sense that it's not printable. It removes the ability for the government to print and steal our wealth away and make our stake more expensive. Oh, and by the way, when the government has all that power, they crack down on the farmers and the ranchers. We've probably seen a lot of that going on because they want you to be eating slop because it makes their lives easier. And we can, that's a whole dark rabbit hole in its own. Like, why do they actually want people to be sick? Well, they've got a lot of big pharma donors, they've got a lot of big food donors, a lot of lobbyists, and it kind of makes it easier to push tyrannical rule when people are a little bit weaker and not thinking straight. All these things are involved here. The solution is that we need to fix the money and make the money uh, sound again, and not this infinite monopoly funny money that gets the U.S. debt to $35 trillion. No one on earth is talking about that. You're not going to hear that on TV. They don't talk about that on the news because this is such a massive bomb that's going to go off and cause tremendous pain because they just continue kicking the can on this debt. So what Bitcoin does, in a nutshell, it's reinstating the soundness, this mathematical truth to money. It removes the ability of the government and the Federal Reserve to print, and it brings back the ability to save money. Like that story where I talked about how holding gold used to increase your wealth over time naturally. You're able to save because human beings will always continue to get better at working together. The supply chains will get better. We've gotten more efficient at everything. So why the heck are things getting more expensive? People are starting to ask themselves. This doesn't make sense. Things should be getting cheaper, right? You look at the electronics industry, like TVs, those are getting cheaper because the speed that the electronics are being made more efficient is faster than the rate of inflation. But the rate of inflation is pretty fast, so not very many other things catch up with it. And everything in the world will get cheaper over time if we have a sound form of money that can't be inflated. And it's really important for people to understand that. Again, the book that I recommend is The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And I talk about that a ton on my podcast too. Bitcoin was my original baby. That's why I started my podcast, to talk about that. And Carnivore came in after that, and it's just incredible how closely they intertwine.
So, like, thinking about it from a government perspective and relating it to carnivore. So I don't think that carnivore is ever going to be a thing that's going to be government mandated or government recommended or anything like that.
Never. It works against their interests.
Mandated is probably the wrong word. Yeah, right. But then I would think, would that be the same with Bitcoin?
In this, how so?
In the sense that governments would readily accept that as that's the form of currency we should use.
So good question. So Bitcoin definitely works against the government's interest because Bitcoin brings the power of money back to the people and the individual. And I didn't even mention just Bitcoin's original purpose, which is just giving the people the ability to transact with each other without a third party. Right now, the way things work is you swipe a credit card and that transaction bounces from the bank over to the person. And there's like remittances from people all over the world. If you're trying to pay across borders, there's rent seekers like swiping away money the whole time. And the biggest one for the government, though, is they right now have the Federal Reserve at their disposal. They can print all the money they want for any bill they want and no repercussions. And this is a big deal. There's no responsibility required because they can just print more money, print more money. And so all the campaigns that you see for politics, we're in a big political season right now. So we're going to hear all kinds of big promises about how the politicians are going to give us all this amazing free stuff. And people don't connect the dots that this free stuff that they're advertising, they're going to print the money for and make everybody poorer for it. So people don't understand that there's no free lunch there. You're losing purchasing power every time they print money. And not to mention just the totally evil things that they're doing, just wars everywhere. They love infinite wars that never end because the military industrial complex just keeps getting fed and fed. And they love big pharma. tons of money. They all get their huge paychecks. None of the politicians are actually there to make the salary. They're there to get those connections in the big industries that just make tons of money off of people being sick and killed. It's really, that's like, it's dark, but that's the way it is right now. And yeah, this is, I mean, oh man, we got all kinds of rabbit holes we could go into, Dave. Another one that I've been looking into more closely, which is super similar in how I found it to Carnivore. Where when I first heard about Carnivore, that's crazy. These people are crazy. There's no way that's true. That they would never lie to us about something like that. This, have you heard of geoengineering? Does that term ring a bell to you?
No.
You've probably heard the bad C word, chemtrails. This word that has been absolutely ossified into people's brains as like a shut-off switch. When they hear that, they think, oh, that's crazy conspiracy theories. We wouldn't listen to that. Well, when you dive deeper into that rabbit hole, turns out there might be some truth to it. And you know how we always see these headlines about how Bill Gates is funding all of these companies who are trying to block out the sun because global warming, we need to stop global warming, we need to, pump chemicals into the air to block the sun out. Turns out they've been doing that for decades already. And it's just been hidden. They haven't asked anyone's permission, they just do it. And so there are actually planes being flown around, dumping chemicals around. And I encourage people to go to my YouTube channel. I made a playlist about this, which has a bunch more. I'm kind of rambling right now. These videos are the actual case. There's a man by the name of Dane Wigington, spelled Wigington, who has really been just leading this charge, really exposing what's actually going on there. And I encourage people. I know that people will probably think I'm crazy for even talking about this, but remember, you said that about Carnivore too. You said Carnivore was crazy too. We all did. So it's worth looking into. All of these things are worth looking at with a new open mind after Carnivore. And this is why I love bringing all these new rabbit holes into people's minds who get on the carnivore diet, because we have all this new vitality and brain power to look into these things now. We have just more energy, more motivation. We want to do more. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bridge people into new avenues, and those are just a couple that I think are big. There is one more I was going to throw in. Bitcoin was one. I took these notes. Bitcoin's number one. Carnivores need to get into geoengineering. Talk about health. Oh my gosh, that's a huge health ramifications for that. The third one is one that I'm pretty sure you've never heard of. Actually, quite positive. It's called Nostr. Nostr. And what this is, it's a social media protocol. So this is extremely interesting, and we're very, very early to this, but just like Bitcoin, this is decentralizing communication. The way that Bitcoin decentralizes money, Nostr is decentralizing communication. And essentially what it's doing is, it's, instead of having a centralized platform and a server, like I'm going to move, the sun looks so funny on my face right now. It's just decentralizing the centralized server that places like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook currently run on, and it splits that out, and so it runs on these things called relays. So this is a protocol where you can go on, and it is literally impossible to get banned because you can just run your own server and it works. There are these things called clients, which are basically the interfaces where you go to access the data from these relays. And these are like the apps that you use. Like instead of clicking on Twitter, I click on Primal, which is the one that I use. Or if you're on Android, you can use Amethyst. Or on iPhone, you can use Damus. They have all these funny names. Again, more info on this on my YouTube channel. I have a playlist about it. But this completely changes the game because there's a true free speech protocol now where it's impossible to be banned. If you play out the scenarios for carnivores, I think we can all agree that things are looking at the very least interesting for the future as the government continues getting more and more power. They're never going to love people getting healthier and asking more questions. That goes against their interests. So those governments have the power to manipulate these big tech companies and the social media platforms that have a centralized server. So this is a new solution that's really interesting in that sense, and is great for people who are facing a lot of censorship. And even myself, just on Twitter, I can tell when I try to post certain things, it just gets shadow banned. And it's really hard to get the message out. And Nostr doesn't have any algorithm. There's no algorithm. Everything is completely chronological. You follow exactly who you want, and there's no CEO, no company that can stop you. It's extremely interesting. And also, it's Bitcoin integrated. So it's easy to send Satoshis to people that you find value in. So it's peer to peer payment. It's like Venmo built in, basically, where you can actually just send people direct payments for their content. And just a couple of weeks ago, I just posted a meme, and someone shot me $75 of Bitcoin just instantly, just for, oh, cool meme, bro. So I mean, it's a good way for people to monetize as well. So I'm really beating the table for carnivores to look into this, because we need to set up shop somewhere that can't be censored. We know that that's going to be coming down a pipe as we continue to grow this movement, and it just becomes bigger, and people start asking more and more questions, and going against the big government interests. It's an incredible place to set up, and it has, like I said, has Bitcoin centered right there, so you can start accumulating your Bitcoin savings right there, which I fully believe is the next global reserve currency. So I mean, when you're running on a carnivore diet, you you're saving money in Bitcoin, which can't be debased, which is like actually your money forever with a hard cap supply. And your social media is on Nostr, and you cannot be banned. You're running on super mode, my friend. This is what I've been doing for the last several months. It feels powerful, man, because nothing can stop you. Not You can't be deplatformed anywhere. You're running at max capacity. I really think this is the trifecta, and I've written blog posts about this. If people go to my website, really talking about these three things and why I think that these three things are the true key to just advancing humanity to the next level. I really don't think that's hyperbolic. This When you give people real free speech and sound money that grows in value over time, it's deflationary, it helps them save, it changes the way that everyone's mindset works, where we're thinking longer term. The more long term and this is so common for carnivores. When they fix their hormones when they eat, they start thinking about, oh, like, I actually want to have kids and start a family. I want to, like, do that thing that I always meant to do. I've always just been too scared of it. It brings everything together, and it just builds a more powerful humanity. And it's super exciting in that sense when you start building and stacking these things together. That's what I'm passionate about.
Awesome. So, Ben, what are the best ways to find you online? So you've got your YouTube channel, and what other places?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel is great. I put all my podcast episodes there. My website, which I put in my little name tag there, just benwehrman.com. The direct link to my podcast is thebenpod.com. And I'm kind of a domain collector. I like getting these domains that go to certain sites that help people down these rabbit holes. And the ones I mentioned earlier, I'll list them off. To learn more about Bitcoin, you go to whybitcoinonly.com. For the Carnivore website we mentioned, whycarnivore.com. For Nostr, I made studyNostr.com. And for the geoengineering, I got geoengineering.info. And that just takes you to a playlist in my YouTube channel, which has a bunch of videos about that, which I really encourage people to go listen with an open mind and see what you think. But yeah, those are my links. I got all the socials. I'm on X, Ben Wehrman. I'm on Instagram, the Ben Pod. I'm everywhere. We're everywhere, Dave. We're coming.
Awesome. So I'll link to all those below. I appreciate you coming on, Ben, and sharing your story, and thank you also for sharing your knowledge about Bitcoin and about Nostr.
Absolutely. I hope that I made some sense in that rambling there. It's funny. This is my first time being an interview guest. I'm normally the interviewer, so this is kind of my first run through this. So I'll listen back and see how I did. But I really encourage people to just go look at my YouTube playlist, where I have much smarter people than me explain all of those things that I just threw at you. And I hope that you take the dive into the rabbit hole. I think you'll be very glad you did.